But without further ado, Mark, the stage is yours. Welcome back to the UK.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here. Good morning, everybody. Mark Nelson. Excellent. It's kind of warm in there. We're going to lighten things up a little bit here. I do have a lot of material, so the pace will be fairly fast. However, it's so much more fun when you ask questions. I already got my first question. The reward for a question, of course, is a piece of chocolate. Yay. I do have to stay in the front because this is being recorded, so a special hello to all the folks who are watching it on video. We'd really rather have you here. So next year, come join the fun in the room. It's a much better experience. So we do have a lot to cover. Let's get right to it. We have a little bit of a roadmap to go through of the stuff I'll be covering. The first part, we're going to focus on what's in RACF. So we'll talk about some RACF ParmLive, a change we've made there, because we actually have one now. Some other enhancements, about 7 of them altogether. I'll mention PCI Services, another element of the security server. And then we'll finish with a brief, very brief discussion of ZOS pervasive encryption. That's really a tease for tomorrow's session. I have a session we'll be talking about it for a full hour. Marna will be covering some of pervasive encryption in your What's New in ZOS section. So do check out, there's lots of material here. If you can't get to either of those sessions, stop and have a chat with us. Pervasive encryption is a game changer on ZOS. So 30 years ago, I took a 6-month assignment in RACF, and I'm still there. And the reason why I'm still there is I get to work on stuff like this. It's a joy, an absolute joy. So let's talk about RACF ParmLive. How many of you have RACF, therefore have a RACF data set? Every hand in the room goes up. Excellent. How do you specify that RACF data set? RACF has to know where all of its information is. Well, we put it in a table, the RACF data set names table, ICHR DSN table. And in there, you'll give us a list of every RACF data set that you have, every primary, every backup. If you have a split RACF database that has multiple data sets comprising your RACF database, you'll put those names in here. You'll tell us what how many buffers you want associated with each data set, and you'll give us some options about what information you want replicated to the backup. Easy, simple. How do you specify this? In assembler language. Now, did anyone catch it in the video this morning when they had this picture of that young lady sitting there at the tube? What kind of code was that? It was assembler. That was the highlight of my day. Right? I expected to see some kind of high-level Java something. No, it was assembler. By the way, thank you for recognizing. I'm glad you all caught that little subtlety there. And I love the fact that folks are focusing on learning assembler anew, but it is kind of a pain. It is one of those skills that not everybody has. And quite frankly, we shouldn't force you to use something like that when there are better alternatives available. We'll get to what that alternative is in ZOS 2.3 in a moment. In addition to the RACF dataset names table, if you have a split RACF database, you have to give us a RACF range table, which tells us what profiles go into which dataset in your RACF database. Once again, it's a simple table, quite frankly, but you have to code it in assembler. And I do love assembler, but every time I see that, I have to go back and re-understand what does it order do, what are the different data types. Wouldn't it be nice if there were a better way? By the way, how many of you still have the source for your RACF range table and or your dataset names table? Not necessarily everybody. I have run into that. So, is there a better way? Yes. You can now, starting with ZOS 2.3, put the information that's in the RACF dataset names table and the RACF range table into your ParmLive datasets. Yay. How does it work? There's a new keyword in IEA sysxx, RACF equals. 2-character value. Yes, you can specify multiple of them there, up to 3. I don't know why you'd want to, but you can. And what we'll then do is look in the ParmLive concatenation for the member that you've specified there, which will be IRR, PRM, whatever you specified, XX. And the content in there is pretty much a ParmLive, I should say, statement syntax expression of what you've had in those tables. Database options, that's kind of our first keyword. Then you'll tell us the information about the nature of your RACF database and how it's, not how it's organized, but the mode in which you're running. Are you running in RACF data sharing mode? Well, we use the coupling facility. Are you running with Sysplex communications, which says RACF will use XCS services to talk to the other RACF systems in your Plex? Or you're running with neither of those, right? That's a system level option that you have to set in the dataset names table, which you can set in ParmLive now. Then you'll give us the list of data sets that comprise your RACF database, prefaced by dataset name table, and then an entry for every pair of primary and backup RACF data sets. You'll also tell us the option for what you want updated into that backup data set with the update backup keyword, and you get to specify the number of buffers. The only number you should specify is 255. We will default to 255, as opposed to the older style table, we defaulted to a much lower number. So after you've told us what data sets you have, the next keyword is range table. And now you express your range table, rather than in that kind of arcane assembler syntax, in a much easier to understand syntax. So for example, if I wanted to have entry, the data set 1, have all of the entries that started at hex 00, I'd say start 00, that's expressed in hex, entry number 1. If I had a character value, it's the same thing. You say the value you want, in this case the character n, and you simply indicate it's a character, and that goes into data set number 2. Simple, straightforward. I love assembler, and I'll be honest with you, my colleagues started working on this. I didn't see a huge amount of benefit until the first time I had to create my own RACF data set for some testing. And I simply looked at the syntax, and how do we find the syntax of something? You copy a sample from somewhere, so I copied the sample out of a book, and in far less time than assembling, link editing, putting it into the right library, that's always the thing I forget, put it in the wrong place, and it doesn't get found. I simply put it in Parlib, and I re-ITL'd. Now this doesn't change the things you have to do to make your RACF data set active. You still have to ITL. This is not dynamic RACF data sets. This is simply the RACF data sets in Parlib. But that's still a big step forward.
Oh.
Yes?
You shouldn't specify anything except 255 plus. Why have it as a PAL at all?
The question is, if you don't specify, if 255 is the smartest value and the default value, why would you specify anything at all? You shouldn't, in my opinion, but the amount of buffers you specify does affect the amount of ECSA you would use. Those are buffers that come out of ECSA. And it's the number of 4K buffers. Now, ECSA for most folks, the 1 or 2 or 10 or 20K is not going to make a difference, but if you really are storage constrained, you might have to choose a lower value. I haven't run into anyone who's had that situation in 10 or 15, 20 years. Excellent question. Yes, sir.
If you specify an entity primary DSM, does it still prompt for?
Yes, so the question is, what happens if I specify a SLAT,
Yeah.
which is what you used to be able to specify in, you can still do that, you'll get prompted at console. Do you do that?
For emergency, yes.
For emergency purposes, it makes sense. For most other purposes, no. Excellent, excellent question. Okay, any others on Parlib? All right, so in addition to this, you have a RACF command, a TSO command, I should say, shared by RACF, that will validate your parmlib RACF entry. And it's rack prmck, and you simply rack prmck space member open paren, and then the full name, you'll put the 2 characters there, you put the full name of your parmlib member. And it'll go out and verify it and say, yes, it's fine, or no, we found an error. And if it finds an error, it says we found an error at line 32. It doesn't give you a lot of details, quite frankly. But it will say, line 32, there's an error. You go back and look, the syntax is straightforward enough. Yes, I made mistakes when I was coding my first couple, but it took maybe 2 tries to get it right. And this was fabulous. You don't have to ITL to find out it's wrong, like you used to, if you had the assemble table. So that's nice.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Does the syntax check Parlib level? Does it go and verify the existence of the data set?
Excellent question. It only syntax checks it. There's only syntax. I'm not supposed to run forward of here, so yes. All right. Now there are other places where the data set names table and range table are referenced. One of them is the UT400 utility. This is a utility you'll take if you have a single RACF data set and you want to split it into multiple parts. Not many people do that anymore. I'm a big fan of a single RACF data set. But should you ever find the need to go and split the RACF database for whatever reasons, well, talk to me first so we see if you really have a good reason. And if you decide that you do, you can specify the range table in for UT200 with a new keyword called range. It already had a keyword called table, where you point to the assembled version. Now you can point to the parmlib version. Now, if you pick the one, if you want the one out of parmlib, just say exec pgm UT400, comma, range IR PRM02. But if you have it in some data set that's not in parmlib, which is perfectly fine, there's a new DD name, range DD. Straightforward. Now, if you want to go out and generate a parmlib entry from your existing range table, hey, that would be cool. Not technically supported, quite frankly, but our test team decided it would be a useful function, so they created some Rex code that will do just that. You point it to where your load module is, it will extract it and create the equivalent parmlib entry. Thank you to the RACF component test team, June, Gail, and Sarah, great group of folks, put this together for us. It's an as-is Rex utility. It's out on the FTP server. The URL is there, the public.dhe.ibm.com one, where RACF puts all of its goodies. At some point, we may move that stuff somewhere else, perhaps GitHub. There's a lot of interest in moving stuff over there. But that would be my starting point. Just look at the RACF goodies webpage, and you'll find that. And that's Pond. Questions? Yes, sir.
Have you had any users who have been looking to use this and got the order that they've defined the database in that form member messed up? Like they may have had two, and they know, well, I'll add another one, so I'll just repeat the lines from the second one, and then they've made that the third one. Should the entries not have a name rather than just the order?
So the question is, have we had folks make a mistake because it's so much easier to cut and paste than just replicate a line? And has it caused folks problem? And shouldn't we put a name on it instead of an entry number? We spent hours as a development team discussing back and forth. We've worked with some buzzword alert sponsored users. That's part of the Lean and Agile and DevOps thing that everybody's talking about. What I like about it is we actually get to talk to real people who are going to be using this. They were comfortable with the numbering scheme because that's how the table is laid out now. So we haven't seen folks having issues with it, to answer your direct question. We did consider going the name option. We decided not to for consistency with what we do now. And the vast majority of folks, RSH Consulting ran a survey, and 83 or 84% were running with a single RACF data set. So for those reasons, we stayed with it the way it was. Good question. Others on Pondwood? All right, next things. Field level access checking. Something in RACF that folks haven't really thought of in a long time. And the concept is fairly straightforward. Remember, RACF profiles have a base segment, and then we have other segments in there, TSO, OMBS, whatever it might be. When we designed segments back in RACF 1.8, somewhere in the 80s, the first one that went in, I believe, was either TSO or DFP. They may both come in the same release. And in both cases, we had a concept of we wanted to allow someone to be an administrator of all the TSO segments. Right? So we had this ability to say that when you have the ability, when you're an administrator, right, if you want to update the information that's in a segment, you have to have one of a couple of authorities. You could be RACF special, very powerful, but don't like giving that out to everybody. You could do anything you want to any field in a segment. You could have the auditor, or starting in ZOS 2.2, you could have the read-only auditor attribute, and that would allow you to look at the contents of what's in a field in a segment other than a base segment. The third way we gave was, or you could have authority to a resource in the field class. The format of that would be profile name, .segment name, .field name. And if you had authority to that, that would allow you to, read authority would allow you to see the field, update authority would allow you to update the field. For every user or group or data set or general resource that had that segment, there was no segmentation whatsoever. That was the issue, that was it. It's an all or nothing. You can't limit the authority. Group special did not apply. That's the key thing. So, with ZOS 2.3, you can scope that field level authority. That is, you can parse it down a little bit, right? And the way this works is there is a new resource in the field class called flag.skip.basecheck. That's the resource name, right? It's in the field class. If that profile does not exist, or a user has read authority to it, then it's the old rules. It's the old rules. You have to have group you have to have special, you have to have one of the auditor attributes, or you have to have explicit field authority. All right, so if the profile not defined a read authority, it's the old rules. If the profile exists and it's none access, then you're going to get the new behavior. And what the new behavior is you need also the authority to the base segment of the profile. How could you get that? You could have group special as an example. So this little flip allows you to extend group level privileges all the way to all the segments. That's remarkably useful, especially when we start talking about what we'll be doing in pervasive encryption, because there's a new field in the DFP segment. We'll find out about that later. Now, users who have that none authority, which says old rules, the old rules include the ability to specify ampersand rack UID to allow people to update information in their own segment. That's existing processing. The old rules, it's just one of the old rules, and that's flat.skip.basecheck does not apply to special users. Again, That's more just an extension of the old rules. Questions on that? All right, moving on. Enhanced generic owner. So, when we came out with paragraph 19 in 1990, there was a concept of generic owner introduced. And the idea there was if you had a user who had cloth authority, you could restrict them so that when defining a profile, they had to have not only the cloth attribute, but they had to have update authority to the profile that was one less, if you will, in terms of specific. Right? So you had to, when you're defining a new profile, we would look at the covering profile for that profile and say, do you have authority to that? Oh, yes, you do. Well, then you can define this profile. It was an additional authorization control. We really did it for JES school, so that folks could control their own JES school profiles. Somebody would create one that protected all of your JES data sets, and then you'd be able to create more specific ones to give authority to whom you thought was appropriate. Now, the interesting thing about generic owner is it worked great, except it didn't work for member grouping profiles. So member grouping profiles, we see them a lot in CICS, a lot in CICS, in IMS and DB2 in some cases. But it's a way of taking dissimilarly named resources and aggregating them together. You use the admin keyword, right? And you use a grouping profile to establish the rules. Well, it turns out the generic owner did not work. In those cases, we fully documented that, so this is not a bug, it's a feature. But now we have a better feature where generic owner will apply to grouping and member profiles. So, the new keyword is SetterOps Enhanced Generic Owner. This does not happen automatically, you have to enable it. So, take a look at what you have in your member grouping profiles, see if this is going to be appropriate for you. Questions? All right. We may finish on time. Yes! That rarely happens. UID 0 consistent reporting. I remember when we came, people started talking around depth about bringing Unix onto MVS at the time. And you gotta admit, Unix is a different way of thinking about things. We don't have users in groups, right? We have UIDs, we have GIDs, we have these permission bits. It's a little bit different. So there was a little bit of trying to get these two worlds to coexist happily together. I think we've come a long way. It was a little rough initially, but for a number of years, I think folks have been very, very comfortable doing Unixy things on ZOS. It's what you do, it's what you have to do. There's this one little anomaly that constantly annoyed folks. It annoyed me, it annoyed lots of folks with whom I talk. And the concept there is the UID works great when you have every user has their own UID. From a security perspective, that's where you want it to be. But there's this one UID that tends to get shared. And that would be UID 0. Chocolate for everybody. Yes, UID 0. Unfortunately, it's also the most powerful of all the UIDs. It's the one you wanted shared the least, quite frankly. And at one point, when we started the conversion to application identity mapping AIM stage, we capped you at 126, I think it was, number of users that could share the same UID. And the first complaint we got was, I have more than 126 UID 0 people. Folks, that's a problem. We did not change that limit. We worked with folks to get that number down to a much more reasonable number. All right, but fundamentally, UID 0 is still shared a lot of environments. So when you do an ls-la or one of those things which shows you all the information about a Unix file, and it gives you the file owner. Well, what's stored in Unix is a 0, right? How do we map that to something that is understandable, right? Well, there's a service that gets called by Unix System Services. And unfortunately, the value that gets returned is, it is predictable, but it's predictable on lots of different things. At one point, it depended upon the order of references that you had made, right, and how we had cached things. As time went on, it got a little more predictable. So at the ZOS 2.2 timeframe, if you had 3 users, S-user 1, S-user 2, and S-user 3, and you created them in that order, right, then no matter which user ID was the owner of the file, it was UID 0, and it would always show up as S-user 1, right? Okay, but then if you deleted that user, suddenly, if nothing else changed, you just deleted the user, now the user shows up as something different. That is annoying. At least it's predictable now. Before this, we would pretty much, depending upon how things got cached in VLF and some other things, that was what we would pick. But it was predictable, but still, wouldn't it be nice if it were more predictable? Well, now it is. Our buddies over in ZOSMF for years have had the specification for their super user ID. It's in the BPX PRM XX member, super user, and you put a user ID in there. We're going to use that. Easy, simple, logical. You already should have had a value there. That value should have had a UID of 0, and if not, I can't say results are unpredictable, but results are not what you want. Right? It is possible you didn't specify it, and if you didn't, then we'll simply echo out a 0. And then fundamentally, if you're running a well-configured ZOS Unix environment, we're now going to show you that BPX root 1 consistently. If you want to, you can change that without IPL, I'm told. Yay. There's a RACF service that's called by Unix System Service to actually do the mapping. You can call it yourself. Don't know why you want to, but you can. And you'll get a consistent report. Life is good. Questions? I have 5 pounds of chocolate. I am willing to, it's a 7-hour flight. That's about £1 an hour. I can do that. All right. Let's move on to the next one, email address in the work address segment. This was actually a very simple one for RACF. We have the ability to add new fields into the RACF database with an update to the templates and a change to dynamic parse. But the fun stuff here is what it's going to be used for. And I suspect that's what we'll have most of the discussion. But the name says it all. We now have the ability to store an email address in the work address segment. The work address segment has a really interesting history, in my mind at least. We introduced it for APPC. Does anybody remember APPC? A long time ago. Right? Not a lot of exploitation as far as, as I saw. But folks liked the work address segment because it had some large fields, 80-character fields, that were very much free-form. So people started using it for lots of different things. Right? So now we're getting on the bandwagon and we're using it for something. We have an email address in there, and it is the WAEMAIL, so work address email, no dash. And you simply put in there the case-sensitive email address of the user, which is associated with this email address. So work address is another segment. It's a new field, another segment associated with that user ID. If you want to take away someone's email address, it's no WA email. Great. Now, this is an alias field in RACF. It means you have to be at AIM stage 3. Is there anyone who hasn't moved to AIM stage 3 yet? Good. We've had a health check that's asked you to for a number of years. It came out 15 or 16 years ago. If you're doing Unixy things and there were some real performance reasons for having it, AIM stage 2 allows you to do some additional search things. It's where you want to be, and if everyone here is at it, life is truly good. The length of this field, 3 to 246 characters. It must contain an @ sign, and that's it in terms of the validation that we do. We do not make sure it's a valid email address syntactically or logically or anything. It's just, we take what you say verbatim, quite frankly. There are 2 RACF services that can be called. One will take an email address and map the user ID. That's why it has to be an aliased field. And the second one will take a user ID and return an email address. Very straightforward. Very, very straightforward. The only thing that's kind of interesting is the email address must be unique. Must be unique. You can't have the same user ID. You can't have 2 email addresses associated with the same user ID. But there's a trick. Right? Remember I said it's case sensitive? Are email addresses really case sensitive? No. So if you have 3 users, all of whom want to have the same email address, make a case difference somewhere in the, yeah, it's cheesy, but it works. Or so I'm told, right? I only have 1 user ID because I'm a security guy. I shouldn't have more than 1. What else? Now, who is going to be using this? ZOSMF will be using this starting in ZOS 2.2. So this support actually does roll back to ZOS 2.2. It's one of the few things we're rolling all the way back. Pervasive encryption is the other one. We'll wait till we get to that discussion. In ZOS 2.3, you can specify as an email address as the notification recipient of job status information. So when the job ends, and you get that message, the job has ended, you can actually have that sent to an email address. I like that. The first time I played with this, I don't know why it intrigued me so much, but I sat there, I wrote a Jenner job that just did nothing. I said notify, gave it an email address, and I waited about 30 seconds later. An email showed up saying job had completed with this return code. Why did I get so excited? I don't know.
What's the underlying infrastructure you need for the email SMTP?
Oh, that's a great question. So what is the underlying infrastructure? 5 letters, ZOSMF. Are you configured with ZOSMF with this notification facility?
Right.
You are?
No, don't know.
Okay. If you are, you're in good shape. If not, you've got some work to do. Now, Maureen, do you cover that in your session?
No, not very much.
Okay. See us afterwards. Good question, good question. Yes, nothing happens as easily as we make it sound in a presentation. On our test system, on our development system, so that is really a production system, I simply coded notify user equals mark n type equals email. Boom, and it showed up. It was fabulous, absolutely loved it. So that's it, notify user ID type equals email. And that causes RACF to look up, or causes Jez to ask RACF to look up and find the email address. You can explicitly say the email address and say type equals message. That says, I want it to go out as a normal notify, the old style one. So in this case, RACF gets called to map this email address to a user ID. I don't find that particularly interesting, but it is there. Yes?
What happens if there is no email address in the field?
Good question. Marty, do you happen to know what happens if there's no email address? Oh, no email address to find RACF?
Yeah, in the watcher field.
That's a great question. I don't know. I will test that as soon as I get home. I was more interested in the success cases, which is a bad viewpoint for a developer. Developers are optimists. In a prior life, I was the RACF VM test manager, and I started to become very paranoid there. With this, I was just so overjoyed. I will find out for you. It's an excellent question. I have a suspicion that what happens is that Jez calls RACF and gets a return code saying not defined, and it presents that somehow, but we'll find out. Have you tried that, Morna?
No, I haven't.
They're going to turn us all into testers. That's a good thing. As I mentioned, this is rolling back to ZOS V2R2. 80 part numbers are at the bottom. But when I say the this in that, boy, that's a great sentence. Parse that. The only support that is being rolled back is the RACF email address. The Jez function is 2.3 only. 2.3 later.
But you have to have those icons applied.
Say,
Do you have to apply those icons then?
on 2.3, you do not have to apply those 8 bars.
But on 2.2 you
On 2.2, you do. Yes, excellent question. The 8 part numbers are only for 2.2 or 2.3.
yeah.
Something I should have mentioned, I apologize for this, in the Parnell support for RACF, down-level systems will not understand that Parnell entry. So what you have to do on down-level systems, of course, is still have an old range table, an old names table.
In a sysplex, can you have both?
The question is, in a sysplex, can you have both?
If you're running different versions.
All right, so let's answer the first question that you didn't ask, because that'll bridge us to the second one. In a sysplex, can you have both? It depends on what you mean by a sysplex. If you were in RACF data sharing mode, remember that the first system that IPLs defines the range table and dataset names table for all the other members in the plex. So it doesn't matter there, because whatever one we find first during the IPL process of the plex, that will be the one that's used.
So if you had the plex with 2122 and 23 in.
If you have a plex,
If you bring 23 in
Yes.
First, you're right. Yeah.
so if you bring 2.3 in and you don't have that range table, and you're in a RACF data sharing environment, we will, in 2.3, we'll use the new one, and the down-level systems will get the benefit of that new one during the RACF handshake process that occurs during IPL. Oh, that was an outstanding question. 2 chocolates ago, I guess you know one. Other questions on this? Don't let me forget. All right, 8 bars required. We do have other APIs to extract this information. It's the usual things. Wrap request equals extract. You can do a branch entered extract because some of this information is actually in the ACE where we need it for branch entered extract. And the RAdmin callable service, which is one of the RACF callable services, you can extract this as well. All ways of getting the work out of information out of the RACF data set. Any questions on that? All right. I'm going to get a little uber geeky for a moment. There is an interface in RACF called RAC route request equals fast off. And on rack request equals stat stop, you can pass in a 255 or up to 255 character string called Lobster. And that information simply shows up in the SMF record. So a lot of resource managers, VB2 makes extensive use of this if you're using the rack access control module. They pass in a whole boatload of information. Other resource managers pass information as well. But our buddies over in Kicksland wanted to pass in a lot more. The limit here is 255 characters. They wanted 1,110. So we had to come up with a compatible way of doing this, and this is how we've done it. There is a new keyword called LogsterX. LogsterX defines to rack what the format of that Lobster string is. So before you said Lobster equals, and pointed to a piece of storage that had a 1 byte length and up to 250 bytes of 55 bytes of data. Now, if you say Lobster X equals yes, right, we expect that Lobster string to be in a different format. And the format we expect it to be in is a 2 byte length followed by whatever it is that you want to be there. Now, like I said, whatever you want to be there, there's actually a little caveat. We actually expect the first 2 bytes after that to be an indicator of what type of data you are. So we have a 2 byte length, so that allows bigger strings. You then have a 2 byte identifier that tells us what kind of data it is, and then you have free form whatever you want to put there. Now that 2 byte identifier, right, we've architected a little bit. Identifiers 0 through Fox are reserved for IBM. Values 1000 hex through 1 Fox are reserved for vendors. And values 2000 through whatever else you can put in there, Fox, is for your use. The first one that's being used is identifier 0001, which is being used by our colleagues in CICS Lab. And what they're going to store there is extended remote identity information. So when somebody does a remote authentication to a KICS environment, they'll put in information in there about the registry and some other information. You have a limit of up to 1,100 bytes. That includes the length of the identifier that you stick into this field. RACF SMF unload does process the 0001 record. And as new ones come in, I expect that we'll be supporting those as well. We can't unload the ones that you create, unfortunately. At least not yet. Questions on this? I bring this up mostly so if you have vendor products or you have your own SMF analysis routines, just be aware of this. You've got some more data coming out. All right, questions? Security deployment descriptor. I need to play with this a little bit more, a lot more. Here's the concept. You go out and install something new. As part of the installation process, you're going to have to define some security rules. You're going to have to define profiles for users, probably groups, certainly for resources, either data sets or general resources. I don't care which of the products you're using, RACF, ACF2, or Top Secret, you're going to have to go through that same exercise. And the way we normally do it is we publish in a book what you have to do. Sometimes we give you a sample-like member, so you can actually go and copy the things and then make alterations to it. But it's a bit of a challenge, because what we've specified might not necessarily be exactly what you want. So with security deployment descriptor, we've come up with a new way of specifying what you want added to the RACF dataset. It's XML based. How many folks code XML? A couple of folks. All right, so XML is a very structured way of expressing information. It's a name, a tag, name, data kind of environment. It's pretty powerful. I'll show you an example in a few moments. But the concept here is the product that's creating this new set of security definitions, instead of expressing them as RACF add commands, RACF alter commands, would express them in an XML style syntax. Then you would take that XML document and you'd run it through the security product that you are using, RACF, ACF2, or Top Secret, and then that security product would emit out the commands that you would actually need to execute.
Are the others supporting it?
Are the others supporting it? We have to go and find out, but this was developed in concert with them, but I don't know exactly the level of support they had. But that's an excellent question. Whenever you have a vendor question, I'm going to say to the vendor, right? But security deployment descriptor was developed very much in concert with our colleagues over at the other ones. Good question. Excellent. So, XML document describing what you want going in, XML document out that either contains the commands that you want, or you can ask for those commands to be automatically executed. We'll talk about that in a moment. That's what the better way is. The interface that I'm talking about is IRR SMO00, SMO00, SMO00. We still haven't quite figured out how to pronounce it yet. Officially, the Sec Management Operations API. It's a SAF interface. So I do talk about it in the context of RACF, but it really is a SAF level interface, System Authorization Facility, which means it's a level above, if you will, the individual products. So the specification of this should be common to all of the security products, just like RAC route request equals anything is, just like the RACF tolls, or just like the SAF toll services are. Now, as I said, input is an XML document that says what you want, and that you can specify either definition of a user group, data set, general resource, system options, some of the setter ops options, connecting a user to a group, pretty much all the things you can do with a RACF command. And the output of that will be another XML document, which contains information about the commands that were generated, and if you ask them to be executed, the return codes that came from that execution. It's pretty powerful stuff, and as I said, I need to play with this. You can play with this in lots of different ways. You can do this in Rex, so you don't have to go out and use any other language to do all the services. The services here are available in Rex. We have some samples for you. IRR SMO-EX, this is in Samplide. It's a sample Rex program to read an XML document from the data set and call that API. So that just says, give me the XML document and execute it, and then returns the output into the data set that you specify to the exec. Pretty straightforward. The second one, IRR SMO-MN, does not stand for my initials, by the way. A sample Rex program to demonstrate how to call IRR SMO00 from Rex. And the last one shows you how to parse, how to process the XML output from the call to the interface. There's a Java driver, should you want to call this stuff from Java as well. So there's lots of potential here. And I expect that as folks start playing with this, this is part of the enhancing, if you will, the ecosystem so people can have toys to play with. This is going to be a fun toy. That's a sample, very simple sample of an add user. We're adding the user test. We're assigning it an arbitrary request ID of 01 so we can see it later. So this is the equivalent of a RACF add user command. I'll be honest with you, the first time I saw this, I said, add user test is a heck of a lot simpler than that. Right? But how many of you have tried automating RACF commands? It's kind of tedious. You have to track the output of the commands. It's difficult sometimes to get a return code from the commands because sometimes they're not as consistent as they should be. There are lots of issues with doing that. This, again, XML is a well-accepted and standardized way of expressing data. Here's the data. I want to add a user. What will you get back from that? In that XML returned output document, you'll get an indicator. There's your request ID, so you can tie these things together. So we're adding the user ID test. Let's see. We got a message back as a result of doing this add user, and it's that user test is defined as protected. Why was it defined as protected? Because we didn't specify a password for it. Right? So you get the messaging that comes back, comes up in the XML document. You get the command syntax that was generated and was actually used to create, to execute the command, and you get the return and reason codes. All of it in XML syntax. I'm looking forward to playing with this.
Mark,
Yes, sir.
do you provide a function that can take a RACF database and create the input so you can migrate from one security product to another?
Oh, that is an exquisitely too chocolate question, for which the answer is no. But I've been intrigued by that. When I first started playing with XML, one of the first things I did is I said, do we have a version of the RACF data set that can be emitted that would be easy to parse into XML? Yeah, database unload. And I'll be honest with you, so there's an old saying that when the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So I'm a big fan of DF sort in high school. I actually started doing the translation into XML from database unload in high school. And then the specification got very large. and I kind of lost interest. I then started doing it in Rex, didn't quite finish this, but this might be the impetus. Right, not that I want to convince somebody to convert off of RACF, that would be a bad reason, bad reason. But I do believe that the XML expression of data is actually a very good transportable one. So I'd like to see us try something on database unload, and I might be the person who has to do it. And that's okay, because, you know, that's what Christmas holidays are for. I love the story today about the guy on July 4th, wrote the business plan. That man is a hero. He is a hero. Yes, sir?
Do all the values have to be explicit, or can you do a from type statement to mimic an existing profile?
That is an outstanding question. I think about it. I don't think it supports a from. I will validate that. I don't think it does. I have to read, unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff that describes the deployment descriptor in callable services. So see me later. I'm going to look to find that out. Good question. All right. Well, yes? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, right next door.
Does it support RAC research as well, the certificate definition and keyring and all that sort of stuff? Because we tried to translate RAC research into equipment.
I am paging this in. I don't think it does.
Can you repeat the question, Mark?
Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, does it support RAC DCERT?
Yeah.
I need to validate. I have a gut feeling the answer is no, but I'm not certain. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. More questions on this? We should have an entire session dedicated to RAC DCERT. Certificate authority, certificate installation, or rather the fact that we don't install certain certificates for you anymore. So, ever since we started shipping RACF certificate support many, many years ago, we had a set of 26, rooted 26 certificate authorities that we thought you should have. So what we did is we put them in the RACF database. And if you went out and deleted from the RACF database using a RAC DCERT delete command, we would take it out of the RACF database, and then the next time you IPO, we put it right back in. Because that's the kind of people we were. Gosh darn it. This is what you need. We know better than you. Now, quite frankly, they were added in no trust status, which means they fundamentally weren't usable as certificate authority certificates. But we had a number of folks complain that, no, I don't want this. My security policy says I am not allowed to have extraneous and spurious certificate authorities in my RACF data set. When I say remove it, remove it. So starting in ZOS 2.3, we're going to do that. Now I should say the way we do that is we are not going to remove these, we're simply not going to add them when you IPL. And we have to be very clear about this. There's a lot of folks who think we add these things when you run min00 parm equals update. No, when you run min00, right, it adds 0 profiles. Whether you're initializing or just adding templates, we never add profiles in min00. That was always done during IPL when RACF was initialized. So starting in ZOS 2.3, we will no longer do that for all of these certificates, except for 3, because there are 3 that you really need to have. Why? 2 of them are IBM certificates. We want you to have those. So that's the STG signing code certificate authority. There was a version for before 2.1 and 2.2 and later, so we give you those 2 certificates. And the third is a GeoTrust Global CA. That's used during SMPE processing. But outside of that, we're no longer adding these. So if you do that RAC DCERT delete, the certificate will be deleted now and forever. Unless, you were waiting for that, unless you are sharing your RACF data set with a down-level system, because this is a 2.3 only function. So if on your 2.3 system, you delete that certificate, and then you IPL 2.2 or 2.1 on that shared RACF database, that other RACF will end. Sorry about that, this did not roll back. So this is a reason perhaps to migrate to 2.3. Nobody's buying that, okay. I haven't tried. So note for data, that's a key thing, so I don't want you to be surprised by that. All right, questions? Oh, plenty of time to go into a couple last things. We go through an evaluation process called the Common Criteria Evaluation Process. It's a very rigorous process. It's overseen by folks outside of IBM. We have an accreditation lab that comes in, looks at our development process, looks at something called a security target, which is where we describe what we do, compares it against something called a protection profile, which is a list of all the things that a security product should be doing. make sure we do all of them correctly, and then says that we've met the requirements of the protection profile and assigns us an evaluation assurance level. It's a number between 1 and 7, which says how rigorous is your development process. A 1 is you wrote code and you threw it against the wall and whatever stuff you shipped, roughly. 7 is extremely high assurance, nobody's running at that. Anything that's 4 or above is considered high assurance. RACF has gotten EAL5 consistently for the last, since I think 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, in that time frame. And ZOS, a whole set of products that make up the evaluated computing base, EAL4. Now this process takes a long time. It has to be done on a generally available version of the software, including all PTFs that are relevant to that evaluated base. So for ZOS 2.2, we just finished the evaluation, EAL4 in July, EAL5 in August. Right, so yeah, it took that long to get the process. ZOS 2.3 is in evaluation for the same set of criteria, EAL4 for ZOS and a set of products, and EAL5 for RACF. So we're in evaluation. PCI Services. PCI Services are a certificate lifecycle management application. It's part of ZOS. So if you have ZOS, you have the opportunity to use it. It does all of the usual things. You know, somebody sits in a web browser, says, I want a certificate, it goes to somebody for approval, gets deployed, manages certificate replication lists. It is a certificate authority. It allows you to be your own certificate authority, allows you to not have to pay real money to other certificate authorities to issue you certificates. And we have a number of clients who've used it and saved substantial amounts of money, so just be aware it's there. It stores its information in either vSAN datasets or in DB2. Now, it's storing in DB2, at the time PCI Services starts, it looks to see if DB2 is up, and if DB2 is not up, PCI Services stops. Right? If DB2 is up when PCI Services starts and becomes unavailable, PCI Services simply tries all of its things and says, no, DB2 says no, no, DB2 says no. Starting in ZOS 2.3, you have the ability to specify a wait time, DB wait time in one of the PCI Services parameter places. And what you'll do there is say the amount of time you want to wait for DB2. So now, if PCI Services starts and DB2 isn't there, you can wait for whatever that time is, right? And then if DB2 comes alive, then DB2 will notify PCI Services and things will start anew. Same thing, if DB2 is taken down while PCI Services is running and then brought up later, PCI Services will simply hold its requests until such time as DB2 is available to continue processing. So, new option there. Second thing, I've mentioned that there is a way PCI Services works, is you have somebody who says they want to have a certificate. They request a certificate. Well, it's done with a web application, some CGI scripts that IBM provides. You can now use the Liberty Profile WebSphere service. That's a huge advantage. Why? The Liberty Profile, which is shipping in ZOS 2.3 in the, what do we call it now, the base? I want to use the right words.
Base embedded.
Base embedded. Oh, more buzzwords. Love it. In the base embedded, you can use the Liberty Profile server. It's faster, has a smaller footprint, lightweight. It allows you to have multiple certificate authority domains. So if you want to actually manage multiple certificate authorities within a single ZOS image, you can do that. You need the Liberty Profile server to do that. So yes, it's there, and it's good news for everybody. And Warren can tell you more and more about that. A couple of shameless plugs. First shameless plug. I don't know about you, but I'm always looking to hear more information about what's going on the Z platform. People are doing podcasts now. One of the podcast people is sitting right here. Hi, Marta. Marta, Wally, and Martin Packer do a really good, geeky, technical podcast. They're doing it for about a year and a half-ish, on topics of all the core good ZOS things. Coupling facility, there's just lots of goodness there. Check these out. These are worthwhile. They're short. The goal is that if you have a commute of a half hour, you can listen to one of these. Right? I absolutely love them. There's the URL and a great picture. The second one is something called Terminal Talk. It's done by Frank Vigilio and a guy named Jeff Bisty. These are much higher level ones. If anyone remembers, in the US we had a series called Car Talk. It was two guys sitting in a garage just talking about garage. That's where they got the Terminal Talk. It's kind of what they modeled themselves after, not just the name, but the whole way they do it. Very, very, very lightweight, really fun to listen to, and I have to truth and advertise it. They actually did interview with me as a guest. And I went in there, I had one cheat sheet of notes, and it said, this is true, make fun of Frank. And yeah, they somehow edited our hour of conversation into 30 minutes of me sounding intelligent. I absolutely loved it. The third one, the next shameless plug, is something that just became available in the last couple of days. It's the Enterprise Knights of Z. And the concept here is our system integrity folks put together a series of short videos, and I mean short. 2, 3, 5, 6 minutes. Easily digestible ones that are intended for either new hire folks, somebody who's new to the platform, or somebody who's got a vast amount of experience in the platform, but perhaps not in all of the areas. So these are some, again, this is only available for a day or two. There's something on the security portal, CVSS scores that are applied to our PTFs, ATTLS, authorized Q names, ETDEF, the RACF sensitive resources health check, everybody's favorite. Untrusted registers for PCs and SVCs. There's some in-depth and geeky stuff there. Don't expect high production values. It's one person, whiteboard, right? But it's the people you want to be hearing from because they're the technical experts. So do check it out. The link is in there, and the link is in the handouts that are in the GSE website, so you'll get it there. The last one, we have a bunch of red books. There's a the Z14 technical introduction, well worth the read. We have 2 that talk about certificates on ZOS, managing digital certificates across the enterprise, and a quick setup for multiple CAs should you be going down that path. Remember, red books, price is 0, value is huge. Just go to the IBM Red Books website. It's amazing information available. No cost. All right, I want to wrap it up. We've got 4 minutes. Finished on time. Yes. You didn't ask enough questions. I still have chocolate. Pervasive encryption. I said this is a game changer, and I really do mean that. When I was thinking about the work that went into pervasive encryption, to me it scales along the work we did when we first came out with the Sysplex support back in the 90s. When we came out with Unix support a little bit prior to that, or for those of us who remember when we moved to multi-level security, RACF19, MDS 313, it's that level of a leap forward in the security controls that you have on your environment. It is huge. It is huge. The RACF portion, by the way, is, I won't say it's small, it's there, it's significant, but the amount of change required elsewhere is pretty amazing. So, the rationale for pervasive encryption, we're security people. Unlike our prior speaker said, the first thing you have to do is scare people. We're security, we're already scared. Right? When I talk with folks, there are 2 things that scare folks. First thing is fear of losing data, because that's just bad. And the second thing is fear of being held in non-compliance, because that's bad. There are 2 different types of bad. Right? The latter bad is you might have somebody fining you for non-compliance or saying that you can't process credit card transactions. Right? So both are bad. Both are bad. And there are a couple of stats, so I give you these so you can push them up the chain and people need to know these things. The likelihood of an organization being breached in the next 24 months, some expert has said is 26% of them will have that occur. I personally think it's higher than that, but that's the experts. Of the 9 billion records that have been purloined since 2015, 4% were encrypted. 4% were encrypted. We can do way better than that, and that's really the thrust of this thing called pervasive encryption. The name really does say it all. It's the vision, and we're on a path to the vision. The journey to the vision is every byte that is emitted from that Z14 box is encrypted. So the challenge with encryption has always been, what should be encrypted, where should it be encrypted, and who's responsible for the encryption? All right, those are the classic questions, because encryption, actually, encryption is easy. Key management is hard, right? So the way we like to start thinking about this is a defense in-depth view, right? I always think of the Tower of London. I think most of the things we need to learn about security, we can learn from the Tower of London. By the way, I saw the ceremony of the keys at the Tower of London last Thursday. You need to see that. It's tradition, it's history, and as you walk across the former moat, through the first gates, down the pathway with the turrets with presumably armed people who could have poured lead on me or whatever they did back in those days. Right, defense in depth is really what we need to be thinking about. It's not individual controls, it's a set of controls. that are implemented and deployed widely. Right? Data is the new perimeter. Data is the new wall. Encrypting that data every time it's emitted from that box brings us a step forward in terms of our data protection. We already have a huge set of infrastructure upon which we can build. We've had integrated cryptographic hardware on the boxes for 20 some odd years. We used to have a CCA, Common Cryptographic Adapter, whatever the A stood for, that was embedded in the TCMs, for those people who remember thermal conduction modules, many, many years ago. We came up with the Crypto Express cards. We've had a lot of infrastructure built for security, and now we're starting to take advantage of it. Key on that is the integrated cryptographic hardware, which on a Z14 is faster. For the type of encryption that you do for data sets, it's up to 7 times faster. We also have the Crypto Express card, which is used for secure key and some master key operations. That is also substantially faster. Data at rest, disk and tape encryption. It's been there for a while. Clustering, we now have the ability to crypt the data that goes into your CF. That's a Z14, a ZOS 2.3 feature only. I'll talk about it briefly tomorrow, but I really want to focus on data set encryption tomorrow because that's I think it's something everybody's doing. We've already protected our networks very well with AT-TLS, IPsec, VPNs, and all of that kind of stuff. We have something called the secured service container. The concept there is an image, an LPAR that you bring up, where all the code that is being brought up into that environment has been digitally signed and is verified. It's a controlled environment, not a lot of paths in. The concept there is the creation of security appliances. Not appliances like a toaster, but a security appliances in an application, perhaps running something like blockchain that's existing in an LPAR. We also have key management with a bunch of our various products that have key in their name. The bottom line there, and we're just getting started. So, final questions in the 10 seconds it takes Jamie to walk up here. All right, I will be here through Thursday morning. Stop me if you have questions. Please fill out the evaluations. We have lots of chocolate left. Thank you.